The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, commonly known as the KPG, was one of the worst mass extinction events in Earth's history, especially in regards to the largest of animals. This extinction allowed mammals to take over the dinosaurs, in addition to the extinction wiping them all out, except for the birds, of course. What if, however, the extinction had been a different story? No, not for the dinosaurs, but even for the mammals, birds, and everything else. This is the story of the Cenozoic after impact, a world where the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event still caused the extinction of all non-avian dinosaurs, and where mammals would still rule the Earth, but in entirely different forms, almost entirely due to the phenomenon known as the butterfly effect, in which one tiny, or in this case very large, change can entirely alter the course of history. In our timeline, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, and many other marine reptiles died out due to the massive global effects because of the asteroid, especially resulting in great changes in the oceanic climate, resulting in the massive cooling due to ash blocking out the sun, an overall lack of food, and many other factors. Animals like crocodiles managed to survive due to them being able to rely on freshwater and saltwater habitats, and being generalists. Here in this timeline, plesiosaurs managed to survive using a similar strategy. A small population of polycotylids, also nicknamed false pliosaurs, had evolved into a smaller, freshwater species by the late Maastrichtian in Western Asia. This small population would survive the lesson asteroid strike and persist. Almost immediately after the extinction, this freshwater population radiated outwards back into the ocean, giving rise to a multitude of genera, although with the original genus seemingly becoming outcompeted and gone from the fossil record entirely. One of the most common genuses of plesiosaurs of the Paleocene was Metatarsaurus, a relatively average polycotylid of the time with two known species. The larger of the two, M. caspi, was a large predator of the shallow and open portions of the Tethys, being one of the largest plesiosaurs of the time, feeding on fish, cephalopods, and other plesiosaurs. They gave birth in shallow waters, and as most plesiosaurs, they typically had a single calf to take care of. Alongside that, they were social animals, living in groups of up to approximately 10. However, plesiosaurs of this time, such as Metatarsaurus, may be one of the last of their lineage to have near full control over the ocean, as eventually, new aquatic tetrapod lineages may replace and outcompete them in most niches. But they will not necessarily go extinct or become entirely irrelevant in the future Cenozoic marine ecosystems. Another member of the Metatarsaurus genus is the smaller M. romani, found in the southwestern parts of the Tethys of what is now the Mediterranean Sea. They fed on large fish and squid and were prey to large sharks and even larger polycotylids such as M. caspi. However, unlike its larger relative, they lived in larger pods, up to a near maximum of 30 individuals, likely working together to hunt large schools of fish and ammonites. They were very fast swimmers for their size, reaching speeds approaching 30 miles per hour, being able to outswim most predators. Like its relatives, they went to shallow water to give birth and produced only one calf per mated pair. This world is filled not only with old lineages hanging on, but new groups rising out of the dust. In eastern Russia, ecosystems were uniquely devastated due to their extremely close proximity to the impact zone. Some animals began adapting extremely quickly to these new conditions. One such of these animals was Brontavis. Brontavis was able to take advantage of the environment only populated by significantly smaller than average animals, even for the time, initially arriving from North America to capitalize on the abundant prey, but later they took on the roles of the megafaunal herbivores in the region. Their main diet components were large nuts and seeds from the hardy plant which had a better chance to survive the extinction. As they are enantiorniths, they ancestrally had teeth and claws, but their teeth have all been lost in favor of a crushing beak. Less sought-after foods like leaves, young branches, and roots are consumed when nuts are less common. Females may occasionally consume bones from carcasses to replenish their calcium reserves after laying eggs. Males will mark their receptiveness for breeding with deep, guttural calls that can travel for very long distances. They exhibit only seasonal monogamy, but females may prefer previous mates that she had reared successful offspring with. Both parents will care for their vulnerable young, leading them to food and water. Elsewhere around the world, similar adaptations have occurred too, though. One example was in the forests of North Africa in what is now the Saharan Desert, which was a very wet and habitable environment at the time, which hosted a large variety of herbivores, some of which were found nowhere else on the continent. Such is the case for Theriolochnus, a genus of Taniodont descended from a European species, possibly a Corionictid, who rafted over from the Mediterranean. In these forests, Theriolochnus grew large, comparable in size to large bears, and converged in body plans with ground sloths, with long arms tipped in large, hooked claws for browsing. Adults had few predators. However, young were occasionally preyed upon by crocodilians and few other predators. Elsewhere in the world, similar hothouse conditions existed. As to be expected, reptiles were quick to rise to dominance across the Paleocene, growing to colossal proportions as if echoing the dinosaurs and taking advantage of newly available foodstuffs. Among these pioneers was the immense Platyrincus, one of the largest crocodiles of its day. Rivaling even Mesozoic behemoths like Dinosuchus, Platyrincus measured more than 40 feet long when fully grown, with minimal changes to their body plan, aside from a somewhat more elongated torso and reduced limbs. The main distinctive feature laid in their heads. As their name implied, Platyrincus' long snout was very broad and flat, almost squared off at the edges to form a shape reminiscent of a duck's bill, even with a short spike on the end like seen in our timeline's birds. The lower jaw, meanwhile, boasted an expansive gular pouch converging upon the pelicans and whales of our timeline, following in the footsteps of the long-extinct Stomatosuchus. The teeth, meanwhile, were very small and peg-shaped, but extremely numerous. With the warm water somewhat limiting the still recovering shellfish and coral, the shallow waters of the Paratethys were overflowing with abundant populations of worms, algae, crustaceans, and other such small creatures. It was these vast swarms of diminutive organisms that Platyrincus fed upon. It used its long jaws and its expanding gular pouch to cram vast quantities of silt, sand, and water into its maw via suction feeding, then constrict the pouch and muscles of its throat to force out water and sediments alike and leave the edible matter behind. There were few creatures that could either compete with or realistically pose a threat to a full-grown adult, save for a potentially large mob of plesiosaurs, leaving Platyrincus to grow utterly enormous. Only their need to return to land and lay eggs restricted the females, while the titanic males had no such limitations. Animals managed to do such generalism not just in the Americas as with Capitotherium, but also in Eurasia with animals like Nimbotherium. Nimbotherium was a medium-sized carnivorous pseudocarnivoran, a distinctive and new type of mammal clade closely related to placentals, but outside of the crown group. Nimbotherium was the earliest known representative of the clade, who inhabited the majority of Europe and parts of Western Asia. This creature, by some, however, is considered an omnivore because its diet was only about 75% meat, with the rest consisting of fruit and sometimes ferns or horsetails. This species gives birth to somewhat developed young, usually in large litters, who are raised by both parents. The mother will stay in the den, whereas the father will go out in search of food for the family. These creatures were usually solitary, but sometimes packs of bachelor males would stick together. Another example of mammals exploiting new niches rather than just becoming larger occurred in Paleocene Africa's southern wetlands and river basins, where a small peculiar mammal lurked. This animal is one of the most bizarre animals, even for the time period. Snompcurl-Harx, named for the famous fictional paleontologist who discovered it, Snompcurl-Harxeldorf. It was a small, truly bizarre animal no larger than a cat. It was semi-aquatic, diving into and out of the water frequently, finding its favored prey, shellfish. It had very small external ears and entirely lacked a tail, but it likely had a similar niche to a platypus, based on skin imprints showing it had webbed feet. It had a very peculiar upturned jaw and a somewhat long trunk, both presumably features to better help it reach air or potentially manipulate certain objects. This creature may seem rather inconspicuous now, but one day his lineage would go on to become one of the most unique mammal groups of the entire project and on the entire planet. Although many new lineages had overall taken new spotlights in ways not seen for millions of years, many old lineages were not down for the count just yet. One of the greatest examples of these, other than plesiosaurs, were the ammonites. Once a large group of cephalopods, the same group as octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish, that ruled the Mesozoic waters. This was until the asteroid hit. However, ammonites actually managed to survive the asteroid and went on to survive another 300,000 years or so into the Cenozoic before completely dying out. In after impact, however, they were similarly diminished, down to just 2 families, but here, they actually managed to recover and begin to diversify in the Paleocene. Finding the oceans empty, the 2 surviving families, Baculididae, a family with very straight shells, and Scaphididae, the more traditional ammonites, began to diversify. The most common genus of Scaphidid in the Paleocene is Paleoscaphus, left. This genus has at very least 15 species at this time, ranging from no larger than a few centimeters to the massive Paleoscaphus giganteus, pictured here, with shell widths reaching upwards of half a meter, an impressive feat considering how soon after the asteroid impact it arose. One of the few species found outside of Paleoscaphus is inside of the monotypic genus Toxicoscaphus, right. Toxicoscaphus typically inhabits shallower waters, but is interesting in not where it lives, but for its coloration. With it being only a few centimeters across, it is mildly toxic and has bright coloration, adapting a similar strategy to the modern blue-ringed octopus. The bright colors serve as a warning to any potential predators that this would be a yucky meal. All ammonites of the Paleocene are most typically preyed upon by small sharks, large fish, and plesiosaurs. This concludes the Paleocene videos for the Cenozoic after impact. Important to note, this was not all of the creatures of the phase, but it was primarily the ones voted on in a poll. The vast majority of the project is based in our official Discord server, link in the description, where the project is already in the Paleocene, focusing on the Great American Interchange. On the server, you can see all 1,200 submissions for the project across all 7 of the phases. In addition, you can even submit creatures for the project. Huge thank yous to all of the people who have created for the project, in addition to all of those who are interested in it. As for when we will be starting the early Eocene videos, I'm not sure, but hopefully sooner rather than later. I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you all next time. Bye bye.